Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely remarkable document. We're going to completely demystify the South African Constitution. Now, this isn't just a dry set of rules. It was designed as a transformative roadmap. It was literally written to guide a nation from a deeply divided, unjust past straight toward a unified and equitable future. So, if you've ever wondered how a country actually goes about completely redesigning its foundational laws from scratch to protect human rights, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Right off the bat, from the very first words of its preamble, this document takes a striking approach. It sets a profoundly human tone by just directly, neutrally acknowledging the painful legacy of colonialism and apartheid. By explicitly recognizing those past injustices, the Constitution is basically saying that history itself is the catalyst for change. It's not just a legal text, it's a bold vision for what society could be, declaring right up front that South Africa belongs to all who live in it.
All right, here's our game plan for today. We'll cover 1. Escaping a dark past. 2. Written by the people. 3. The 3 core values. 4. How your rights work. And finally, 5. Achieving true equality.
Okay, starting with Section 1. Escaping a dark past, the roots of the Constitution.
To really understand the laws of today, we have to rewind and look at the political demands of yesterday. The roots of this Constitution stretch back decades. It's actually kind of ironic. In 1948, the exact same year apartheid officially began, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. While South Africa was isolating itself, those global human rights standards were slowly becoming vital. But the true domestic heart of the Constitution, that was formed in 1955 at a revolutionary gathering in Kliptown, where the Freedom Charter was drafted. Those foundational ideas simmered for almost 40 years until the historic first legitimate democratic elections in 1994, which finally cleared the path for the final constitution to be certified in 1996. So the political demands laid out in that 1955 Freedom Charter, which was created by a massive alliance calling themselves the Congress of the People, became the absolute bedrock of the new constitution. Almost 40 years before the democratic transition, 3,000 people from all different walks of life gathered to hash out the core values of the anti-apartheid struggle. They demanded equal rights, shared wealth, democratic governance, the whole shebang. When it finally came time to write the new laws of the land, those decades-old demands were still exactly what the majority of South Africans wanted.
Moving on to Section 2, Written by the People, a massive public campaign.
Now you might be thinking this was just written by a bunch of lawyers in a closed, stuffy room. Not at all. Tasked with an urgent 2-year mandate, a 490-member Constitutional Assembly launched a staggering public participation campaign. Get this, they successfully reached and educated 18.5 million people about the constitution-making process. At the time, that was a massive 73% of the entire population. To this day, it remains one of the largest, most comprehensive public participation campaigns ever undertaken anywhere in the world.
Their guiding motto was literally that nothing should be done behind the backs of the people. And to gather such diverse public views, they had to get really creative. They used army planes to reach remote rural areas. They handed out 160,000 monthly newsletters at busy taxi ranks, broadcasted across the radio, and even slipped over 1 million educational comic strips into local newspapers. They wanted absolutely everyone, regardless of their background or literacy level, to have a direct say in their fundamental laws.
But there were built-in safety checks. This new document couldn't just be popular. It had to be legally bulletproof. The Constitutional Court rigorously checked the draft against 34 strict democratic principles that had been agreed upon before the 1994 elections. Actually, fun fact, the court sent the very first draft back for revisions. It had to be perfect. Once it fully complied, President Nelson Mandela officially signed the final constitution into law on December 10, 1996.
Let's dive into Section 3, the 3 core values, the engine of the Constitution.
So, before even listing out any specific rights, the document establishes this central engine that holds everything together. And one of the most beautiful ways this is understood is through the concept of human dignity, which links super strongly to the African moral philosophy of Ubuntu. Rather than being some dry, abstract legal term, Ubuntu grounds dignity in human connection. It's the idea that, hey, we are not islands to ourselves. Treating people with value, care, and respect is at the very core of the new South Africa, which is a direct, deliberate counter to the uncaring and cruel laws of the past.
The crucial takeaway here is that these 3 founding values, human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedoms, are the ultimate measuring stick for absolutely every single government action.
They don't just tell us what the government should aim for, they mandate how it must behave to build a truly accountable, open, and responsive democracy.
Which brings us to Section 4, How Your Rights Work. Understanding the Bill of Rights.
Okay, so how these abstract, high-level philosophical values actually translate into real-world mechanics. Let's look at Chapter 2 of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. There are a few basic rules you need to know. First off, rights are free. You don't buy them, and you don't earn them by good behavior. Second, they operate interconnectedly, kind of like organs in a body. Your right to life, for instance, heavily relies on your right to access healthcare to actually mean anything. And finally, these rights place strict legal duties on the state and private entities. The government has to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill them, but private citizens and corporations, they also have a legal duty not to interfere with your rights.
But what happens when rights collide? Because in any democratic society, they absolutely will. My right to free speech might bump right up against your right to dignity. The Constitution handles this elegantly through Section 36, which is a specific 5-step limitations analysis. Courts have to carefully weigh the nature of the right against the importance of limiting it. They check if the limitation actually achieves its goal, and crucially, they ask, is there a less restrictive way to handle this problem?
To see how this analysis works out in the real world, let's look at how the Constitutional Court handled the death penalty. They ran it through the Section 36 test and found that it completely failed. Why? Because the death penalty is a total, irreversible deprivation of the most paramount right we have, the right to life. When they looked at Step 5, finding less restrictive means, the court noted that, yes, the government has to protect society and punish severe crimes, but they can do that effectively through long-term imprisonment. They don't have to entirely strip away a person's right to life and dignity to achieve public safety.
All right, our last stop. Section 5, Achieving True Equality, Moving Beyond the Paper.
Given the country's brutal history of systematic oppression based on race and gender, it makes sense that the Constitution explicitly and strictly outlaws unfair discrimination. It lists out very specific grounds you cannot be discriminated against, things like race, gender, disability, and sexual orientation. The entire goal here is to forcefully correct those historical injustices that deliberately excluded the vast majority of the population from resources, power, and basic human dignity.
But this brings up a really fascinating question. Does treating everyone exactly the same actually make things fair? Well, there's formal equality, which just means the rules apply to everyone exactly the same way on paper. Simple, right? But then there's substantive equality. Substantive equality demands that we look past the paper. We have to examine the actual, real-world effects of those rules, factoring in the severe historical disadvantages and the daily, literal barriers that people face.
To achieve true social justice, substantive equality recognizes that treating people the exact same way can actually leave them unequal. Think about it like this. If two kids go to school, but one has a visual impairment, handing them both standard printed textbooks isn't fair at all. The government is legally required to take proactive, technically unequal steps, like funding Braille textbooks or installing wheelchair ramps, just to ensure that historically or physically disadvantaged folks get a genuinely fair, equal chance to benefit from their rights.
Which leaves us with this final, vital thought. The Constitution is an incredible roadmap and a promise, but a piece of paper alone cannot change a society. It gives us the legal power, for sure, but breathing life into its words, that requires constant, active civic engagement from all of us. It asks us to deeply understand our rights and loudly demand that those in power actually fulfill them. So the real question isn't just what the Constitution says, but whether we are using our power to make its vision a reality. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and remember to keep asking the tough questions.